Take a look in here. This room I just emptied. So the way I control bugs organically is I actually will completely empty one of my 2 fruiting rooms and kill off all the bugs by spraying those walls with hot water until there's no bugs in here, and then I'll start putting new columns in here. The other room is just about full, is why I just emptied this room. So this is where the other stuff is going. So,
Wow.
yeah, you can see they just they sense where the fresh air is, and they just start growing out into the open air wherever I punch a hole in the bag once it's mature enough. I just moved a bunch of columns that are ready to pin in here, so I got a lot of stuff that hasn't started producing babies yet, but there's a little bit of stuff fruiting right now.
They're so cute when they're little.
Yeah. Everybody wants me to pick the baby ones. I'm like, I can't make any money doing that. They don't weigh anything. But yeah, they are neat how they form. And really, the colors are the prettiest, I think, when they're babies.
I foresee a market for micro
mushrooms. I'm sure there is, but they'd have to cost a bundle to be worthwhile. That's the thing. I really hate that. I mean, a big part of what we do is try to keep this stuff very affordable.
Yeah. It's so funny. It looks like a little rubber animal.
Yeah, it looks like one of those funny rubber balls or something. I really like this strain. This is a blue strain, but it's what I call my baby blue or summertime blue, because it'll keep fruiting in the summertime when it's really hot out, and all the outside rows on down there are my big blue that everybody loves so much, but unfortunately you can see there's no mushrooms on them, and that's because they really don't produce in the heat.
Oh, really?
Even with the air conditioning, they just don't want to. They don't want to kick out until they can get for a sustained period under 65 degrees, which is hard to attain with an air conditioner in a big room like this. You know, with the necessity to draw some fresh air to feed the mushrooms. So I always tell people, they're like, you just shut off the fans and it stays nice and moist and cool in here. It's like, no, you can't shut them off entirely, certainly not all day, because as much air as it would take to burn this straw, which would be a lot of air, is how much air eventually has to be fed to the mycelia in order to metabolize that straw. So if you think about it, there's quite a bit of air, because I'll fill this room entirely within a month, So I need to get enough fresh air in here to basically burn all this amount of straw within a month or within a few weeks, really. So, it does take a fair amount of fresh air to keep the mushrooms real healthy.
Wow.
Why this is taped here? Is this
Oh, now I can show you. This is, once again, we're very organic thinking. So if I have any bug troubles, and you can barely see it, but there's little tunnels around here. So if a bug lays eggs there, I just I watch it very closely, and wherever I see that, I just seal it. And then, theoretically, a lot of times that blocks the air sufficiently that they just die, the larvae. But if they don't just die, they've got, you get a few. They're usually fungus gnats. There's fungus gnats and there's fungus beetles. There's a lot of insects that are evolved that they eat mushrooms. And of course, being in a mushroom growing area in the woods here, they're right outside our doors. So a few of them inevitably will get in. Now I have screens on my exhaust fans there, but a few of them will sneak around or come in through the door when we come and go. So that is a ongoing struggle.
Right.
But you control them and you watch, and if they get going a little, you just tape and you just make sure that they're not breeding and getting the numbers up badly. A few are not a problem. But, I've seen facilities where they're just everywhere and way too many bugs, and they do a lot of damage. So you do have to control it. And we don't use any chemicals, so it's really a matter of just looking very closely. You develop a good eye to spot them. I know you probably couldn't hardly see anything was going on there, but if you do this for 20 years, you would know. Right. It's like, oh, there's trouble.
And how many times can you grow from one?
Usually, it depends on the strain. Usually the browns, I don't know, are there any browns coming out right now? I didn't really see any along there. It's almost all those baby blues. You can tell why I call them my summertime blues. Yeah, there's really no browns out right now, but the brown columns you can tell because they're a little more lightly run, but they tend to just fruit 2 flushes and then I'm done with them.
Oh.
Sometimes in summertime I can get a good 3rd flush out of them. These guys I can often get 5 good flushes, so they'll just keep producing more clusters if I just take care of them and keep the bugs away.
Okay.
Or keep the bugs from getting to all the holes at least. As you can see, I go through here periodically and tape off any that do get some bugs going. And it's just a matter of staying on top of it.
What about lion's mane? Because
lion's manes we do in the other facility.
We harvested the ones from the grew.
Okay.
The first flush, and then do we just leave it? And does it grow again?
They'll grow. Usually they do 3 flushes.
Okay.
And the first flush often they're real big.
Yeah.
And the second flush they'll be about this big, and the third flush they'll be about this big. They get smaller with each flush.
Do we have to water it again?
No, it should have enough retained moisture in it. It should fruit in a couple weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, you just got to be patient. They need time to rebuild their strength, rebuild their reserves. They got to eat some of that sawdust for you. They're really fascinating organisms in that regard.
They are.
Well, how much do you know about chemistry? Cellulose. Well, you think about how we metabolize food. A lot of people refer to carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, as empty calories. Right. But the truth is, those empty calories are a big part of how we fuel all of our important metabolic processes, like building proteins or fats or whatever. We do need the raw materials, but the energy comes from those simple carbs.
Right.
Mushrooms are very much the same. They can't fix atmospheric nitrogen, but they have a lot of protein in them, which is nitrogen compound. So they take straw, which is almost all fiber, and the fiber is mostly cellulose in combination with lignin. Cellulose is just sugar linked with a single bond in an endless chain. So it's literally just glucose linked one on top of another, basically forever. So metabolically speaking, they're very much like us. We just don't have the enzyme to break the cellulose. For us, it's indigestible fiber, non-digestible fiber. For them, it's sugar. You know, that's their main fuel for driving their metabolic processes. So, you know, that's the great thing about them is they use what we can't.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Awesome.
It makes it into good food too. I think it's good food. I've always been fond of them.
Yeah, we have some killer recipes with your.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
We ate the lion's mane. It was so good.
Oh
good.
man, yeah, it was out of
I
control.
can't wait for them to come out again.
A lot of people don't know what to do with that mushroom, and they try it and they're like, I couldn't figure out.
They're
It's
kinda
mushy
bitter.
and weird.
Yeah, they're kind of.
They got a
kind
little
of bitter
bitterness to them,
taste.
and a lot of people have a real strong bitter
Yeah.
sensitivity.
The texture is kind of
Chewy.
hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to chew.
Yeah.
But if you fry it in a batter, it's so good.
Yeah.
It just makes it.
Yeah,
so much
I like
better.
to almost like pan sear them. I make sure just about all the water's out of them, fairly dried, and then I put a good browning on them and I pepper them well and use them as an accent. Just a couple of slices here and there. I don't tend to like go straight at that mushroom. It's just sort of an accent piece. These I could eat them all day long like popcorn.
Oh my god.
I mean these are just wonderfully edible.
Yeah.
So.
Oh.
But each one sort of has its own speciality in terms of how you use them culinarily. Certainly. This down here, the other thing I tape off I should have mentioned is this is Trichoderma Mold. So if I do get a little bit of bad air into the room there, it will colonize with the mold. It doesn't actually harm the mycelia. It's actually more akin to what you would see in the wild. Is a colony of one thing running up against a colony of another. And it's interesting actually because you see how you've got the green of the trichoderma mold and you've got the white of the mushroom mycelia. In between you've got a real wet, juicy layer. They're battling. The mycelia actually produces antifungal and antibacterial compounds, which is actually why we actually get most of our antibiotics from fungi. Penicillium, of course, is a fungus, but there's a whole series of them that produce different chemicals. And the reason is they're not like us where we have a fairly impermeable skin to protect us and keep bacteria out and a fancy immune system to kill things off that do get in. It's all out there. So they do it by basically just pure chemical warfare against their competitors that grow right up against them. So that's what that juice is. And yeah, that's where you would want to do chemical testing to find new antibiotics and antifungal compounds because it's quite a brew. They're quite resilient organisms. It's funny because in the wild, like one mushroom will parasitize another, and they'll do things like they'll cause the fruit body to abort and not form any gills, so it can't reproduce. They do really mean things to each other. The competitive world of wild fungi is really actually much more fascinating than anything I do here.
Wow.
Have you ever tried growing Enoki mushrooms?
We have grown them. As a matter of fact, they do grow wild in this area.
Really?
Yeah, they do. They don't look
What?
anything like what you get in the store, though.
What do they look like?
They look like a relatively ordinary. Actually, they look a lot like this, but the caps tend to be about 2 or 3 inches. Big caps.
What?
I'm not kidding you. Okay,
They're
stick
tiny,
with me. Stick with me.
What?
You gotta believe me on this, okay? I could get these to grow like the store Enokis, okay? But I'd have to do it in the right conditions.
Wow.
The trick, let me finish with the wild mushroom Enoki. it's what we call winter mushroom around here. It tends to grow on elms, dead elms, in low areas, and we do have clusters down along Killbuck. I see them periodically. And they grow like in the middle of winter, real cold weather. Very unusual. The way they get them perfectly white and with the tiny caps and really long stems, they actually do them in bottle culture. Okay, not these great big columns, but in little jars.
Yeah.
Okay,
Broken.
but and ordinarily that's not a big difference from this, except for they just put a little, like a filter patch on top, let it colonize all through the sawdust, or a lot of times they do that on a real strong grain mix because it likes a lot of nutrition. But that's neither here nor there. It just allows it to be a little more productive. When it starts to fruit at the top of the colony, which is where the freshest air is, it senses the fresh air, remember, they take that cap off, and then they take a piece of paper, and they make a funnel out of the piece of paper and stick it down in the top of the jar. Now, why would they do that? Can't imagine, right?
No.
Okay.
What?
Okay, well, think what the paper would do. First of all, it would block the light somewhat, which is not a real problem, but probably helps to keep them white so they don't develop the pigments, because it is actually a fairly dark mushroom in the wild, too. It's not white. But the other thing it does is the mushrooms are using up oxygen, which is O2, and they're releasing carbon dioxide. Those are the main gas exchange, okay? Carbon dioxide is actually heavier than air because it's a heavier molecule. CO2 is obviously going to be heavier than O2, and I think it's even heavier than N2, which is the bulk of our air. So what happens is, if you leave it in really still air, that funnel of paper fills up with carbon dioxide. And the mushroom won't open its cap up. It won't put energy into opening its cap and developing the gills until it thinks it's out in the open. Because the way mushrooms form in the wild, and this comes from being a wild mushroom hunter before I grew, is they normally actually don't form on the surface like this. As a matter of fact, you'll see that the baby mushrooms actually form inside under the plastic and then push out through the opening.
Right.
Okay? And in the wild, that manifests even more so because you have direct exposure to sun and dry conditions and so forth. They usually form under the bark, where the moisture is retained better, not out on the surface of the bark, because the mycelia can't really live out there because of the hot, dry cycling. The mushroom actually has to push through the bark before it opens its cap. And it can tell if it's grown out into a void or is still under the bark based on how fresh the air is. So it'll keep growing stem, and some of them grow them like a ball until they explode the bark, and some of them grow real long snaky stems trying to find a crack to get out of. Enoki finds the crack by growing a long snaky stem, and then when it gets to the fresh air, it will open up its cap. But they pick it before it opens its cap to make that special form of mushroom. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Wow, that is so...
So you had no idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricks.
Why do they do that, though? Why don't
They do that because Enoki is actually a fairly flavorless mushroom. It doesn't have a strong flavor. It's mostly grown for its texture. It's got that unique sort of crunch, and that's mostly in the stem. The stem is what is the marketable product with Enoki.
Really?
So they grow that for that reason. It's really cool.
Wow.
I want to see the wild.
The wild Enoki, you have to come in late fall or winter when they're actually growing.
What a sight.
Yeah, it's not exciting. It's just like any clustered mushroom growing on the side of a tree. It's
The cap gets really big like this.
yeah, it gets fairly large. I mean, they're not a big mushroom. I mean, some oyster mushrooms will have caps
my
like
God.
this out in the wild.
Wow. What?
But so actually, like a 2 or 3 inch diameter cap is a fairly modest
I can't
mushroom.
imagine that as Enoki being like that.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. And but they do. I mean, if you look underneath, you can see they have very individual stems, and they are kind of long, skinny stems. I mean, they are recognizable in a few characteristics, even in the wild.
Wow.
But they are very, very different than what's
Really
marketed.
interesting.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about like
Uh,
the white? There's some mushrooms called seafood mushrooms. Seafood mushroom.
Seafood. Well, that's kind of a generic name. Maybe lobster mushroom is one of
It
them.
was like really long.
It looks like a gnocchi,
white.
but it's fat.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
fat or
that's
white.
going to be king oyster or trumpet royale is another name for that. It's
Smaller
actually an
than
oyster.
that,
It's smaller than the.
but bigger than
Oh,
a
okay.
gnocchi.
Maybe this.
It's just
thick,
like a gnocchi, but maybe triple as fat.
But
Oh, okay.
I don't know
Could
the other names.
Hanchimenji, or
That's what it said on the label. Seafood mushroom at the Asian market. And we ate it a couple times. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't whatever. It was fine.
was it?
It's
It
just
could be a
white.
number of different things.
Yeah.
It could be one of the we call those beach mushrooms.
Oh yeah, they have beach mushrooms.
Okay,
too.
they have that one
They
too.
have the brown and the white.
Because that's a little bigger, but they don't grow it up as long. They do them in shorter clusters, but that's also bottle culture.
Do you grow that too? Or
I don't. Right now we're just doing several oyster varieties, shiitake and lion's mane.
Is that
and-
the best sellers? Or?
Those are just really good, reliable sellers. It's what
Oh.
the restaurants are demanding a lot of, and it's
Ah.
about all we can manage.
Where
Because we don't have employees, it's just
What
my
about
wife
lion-
and I.
where do they cook lion's mane?
What's that?
What?
Oh,
like
where do they
lion's
cook
mane?
lion's manes?
Yeah.
I know Sasamatsu uses them some. Actually, one of the classic things that have you ever heard of monkey's head soup? Okay, it's a Chinese dish actually. It's it's one of the classic ways that they prepare lion's mane. It's not. They call lion's mane what we call lion's mane. Europeans call hedgehog mushroom. Chinese call monkey's head mushroom. So
In
monkey's
Korea,
head
it's
soup.
called deer butt.
Deer butt?
Yeah.
I love that. I will use that. I love it.
That's what it's called
That's
in
actually a
Korea.
better name because
Right?
of the
It
way
looks
the
like
fur
it.
is.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Anyway, but doing them in soup is and I think that's what Sasamatsu's doing is they're doing like a monkey's head soup. So I think that's what they do. There's other ones that'll do like a grill seared slabs as just like a topper, and I think
we have the best recipe.
I want to find like the soup though.
The-
What it's like.
the thing that everybody's buying them for right now is actually the mock crab cake, which is a
Oh.
vegetarian crab cake because it's strandy and it's real sweet
Oh,
and
that
rich
would
like
work.
crab,
Yeah.
and they just
Ooh.
pull it apart and then they use it like
Oh,
they would
inside the sushi would be good.
Inside the sushi.
Yeah, where they
Oh,
use
you mean
crab
the
usually.
roll?
for. That might be an option.
Yeah.
Mm.
It would be good.
You could cut it into like fish sticks and fry them like fat French fries.
Oh, that would be good.
I can play with it, figure it
Wow.
out. But that's one that's like not been used a lot in the United States, so there's very
Right.
few recipes that are
Yeah,
like
right.
American recipes
Right.
that you got to go elsewhere
I've
in the
never
world to
seen
get
it.
good recipes. But it is
Yeah.
one that's been long in cultivation elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, they're popular in Korea and they eat them.
Yeah.
There's
Do
a
you
lot of
dry
that.
them here?
Drying was not considered processing. And
Oh,
all of a sudden, like last year, they decided, drying's processing, so you can't do it anymore.
Wow.
But they'll probably change their mind again, which is, well, I mean, you can dry every other crop
Right.
without it being processing. Why can't I dry a damn mushroom?
Right.
I'm sorry, it kind of
What?
ticks me off, honestly,
That's
because that's a big market. They don't know what they're doing
I think
in regulating mushrooms
Right.
in the United States. It's funny because they regulate them really tightly, as if they're a major foodborne illness vector.
Uh-huh.
There's never been a case of mushroom, contamination causing illness in